Welcome to StaffBuffalo's Pain Points podcast, where we unravel the complexities of staffing, human resources, and other challenges faced by businesses today.
Welcome to the Pain Points podcast. We have Sam Marrazzo, Chief Innovation Officer over at the BNMC here. And tell us, Sam, how did you navigate your career to get where you are today?
Well, first, thanks for having me on your amazing podcast.
Thank you for coming.
Well, appreciate something coming here. You actually brought the podcast.
Yeah, we're a traveling one. We like to showcase where you are.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
That. I love that you bring your podcast and your, what are the
Microphones. Yeah, our little furry the blush microphones.
Yeah. Very nice. So where I started, basically it started like any other kid going through school, wasn't focused, didn't do a great job in school. I think I finished third in my class, at least to the bottom. And so it was someone advised me, especially my father, and you need to be focused. So I went into the service. I started there and just basically allowed the universe to take me, and I didn't know what I was doing. I just scored fairly well on that dad's VAB or whatever it's called. And next thing was an avionics school.
That's cool.
And I started learning how to play with avionics and wires and planes. I started working on F4s, and then from there worked on these things called the latest planes or F-18s, and worked on the line a little bit. And I got deployed on a USS Independence, which is a large carrier. And that's kind of how it started. But then I started learning there's this PC there that had the Independence in 16-bit kind of graphics that showed the Independence. Didn't do much except it said, CV62, Independence. And I'm like, wow, how did he do that? So it happened to be a locksmith who said, well, this is how I write programs. I'm like, okay, let me see how you do it. It was basic, and I'm getting like all shivering right now because it's so cool. And I'm like, well, how did you do it? So he says, just basically write your program. So he says, pixel, X, Y, and Z, and you do a coordinate, and they started showing me it, and I'm like, so I started picking it up, and I started working on it, and before I know it, I built my own little graphics, and before I know it, I started understanding how the PCs work. And that all happened in, not 1886, it was 1986 when I first touched a PC.
Wow.
That's really cool. Time.
And then where was it? Was it on
a ship?
Airliner? Or that's amazing.
It was
aircraft carrier. Thank you.
I was on the ship, and the locksmith showed me a couple things and used to tell me what they used to do with it was make locks and inventory. It was basically, it was called Lotus 123, I think it was called.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I just said, I don't care about that. I just want to know how it works. And then that's how so we had 2 floppy disks, and I kept playing with it, and I used the military's plan to go to school, GI Bill, and then I went to school, and then I did my thing, and I just kept absorbing more and more computers, and I bought my first computer. My mother bought my first computer from a place on Union Road called Dulex Computer Company, small little printer company, a printer and computers.
That's really neat. What year was that?
I got out of the service in 88. I was a reserve for 2 years, but she got it for me in 89.
Wow.
And it was $1,025 or something crazy like that.
Oh, wow.
And there wasn't even a hard drive in it. So I had a modem, and then if anybody in the audience remembers, I was in a BBS. It was Apollo 3 Communications, and I was one of 2 founders of that thing. And I never looked back. I was constantly looking to figure out how things worked, and I just love tinkering with the computer system.
So the constant curiosity,
yeah.
I have to learn how to do that, and then I can solve problems with it. And so then you kind of took it to the next level of like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, and it's just because what kept happening was new advances. Like, oh crap, there's a 10 meg hard drive. I got to buy one. So I worked hard. I worked, some whatever I had to do, concrete work or this. There wasn't anybody like getting paid to do computer work back then. And a hard drive was $600. I'd never forget this. And I had to get a hard drive, and I installed it myself. So everyone was basically, if you had a computer back then, you did it yourself.
It was a hobby.
Yeah, it was a hobby. It was like a Radio Shack hobby. You go get your things, and you. And
my grandpa was into it. He was building his own computer, and we had to turn it on. And it was, no, you got to turn this light on first, then this light. He had a whole system set up. It was really fun.
So it was, then from there, I started figuring out basic. There's this basic concept, and then there's other programs that were available, and DBase came out, and it was just all just new and fun and just exciting.
So it almost found you. You just like went after it.
Yeah, I mean, all because of the service, right? So
That's great.
I would have eventually found it, but that's what got me into it.
Early too, which
Very
is great.
early, very
yeah.
early,
And then so when you did go back to school, did you go in for any computer science and anything like that?
I did MIS and business together. And then from there, I kept tinkering and started learning how to program. And from there, I got my first job trying to figure out, I worked at this company called Tower Group International. And they are now FedEx, they're a customs broker.
Oh, yeah.
And Tower Group was doing something called EDI. I mean, this is going, I'm so old.
What does EDI stand for, though? I kind of remember.
Electronic data interchange.
Got it.
So basically sending 810 invoices, right? 810 invoice is an 810 representation. Invoice header, line, bill to, the line, what the invoice was, all electronic
Wow.
in a payload.
Wow.
And we'd send it over to the air to, for folks across. So if you're going to buy a case of strawberries, you're going to send me an invoice, I'm going to send you back remittance, right? 820s, 820 is the deposit box or the distribution to the bank. So all that was electronically done.
That's awesome.
So that's why I got pretty good at accounting as well, because I knew all the purchase order was an 850, purchase order acknowledgement was 856. And so that's where it really solidified my career in innovation and technology. Because back then we had to do transactions. Typically, you send an invoice via fax, right? And then you receive it, you send the check through either you go to your bank, you wire it, or you send a check, right?
Yeah.
So back then, 1992 or 93, I can't remember. But in that time era, we were starting to use EDI, and EDI was becoming prolific throughout industry. So I got to be in the middle of industry here at Tower Group International, which is now FedEx, I guess, where is that? Near Niagara Street in that area. So then I got a job because EDI was very scarce, and I left for a company called Avnet. They're out of Chandler, Arizona. And I left for a while.
And then were they another payment processing type organization?
No, they're one of the largest. They're in the $1 billion in semiconductors. So they wanted someone to help them with their EDI.
Yeah. A subject matter expert, essentially.
Yeah, because it was new at the time. It was like the computer was new. We started to learn that. EDI was new. I got to be really geeky about it, doing some really things that no one's done before. And I got really good at that. But then I had to get back home. Like anything else, you want to get back home, right? Too long I'm away.
Yeah. Right on back.
Came back, and then when I landed a job, I landed a job at Praxair, and all that EDI background, but other things I was doing, and they were using this common software between Avnet, which is basically a EDI translation engine, and not many folks were using it, but Praxair could afford it. So I'm like, oh boy, I'd love to get a job there, right? So somehow they hired me as their basically EAI architect, and that basically means anything that comes in a message format, it goes to the sausage grinder and it goes into some type of business system. Okay. So I got very good. One of my career, and I wanted, we'll go back to that, is just because you're in IT doesn't, you really need to know the business side. So one of the things, when you look at the grand scheme of things, if you're in IT and if you think you're in the business of IT, you're not going to last long in organizations. Your job is to show value to the business by either some innovative technology or a efficiency, reducing constraints. And typically that means some kind of tech, but you'll need data. And that data resides in some kind of repository. That's a business system.
It's true.
So ultimately, the life cycle of all things, especially business, is the governance and all things normalized needs to be in a containerization, or basically in a good place, good housekeeping, accounting place. But we need access to that. And we make sure that there's no integrity issue. We gotta make sure that report's proper. So that's why you have those separations of concerns and departments, which I started to learn because of my EDI background, how the flow and the synergies between why a transaction is stuffed into this, say, chart of account.
Yeah.
Right. So that became very, very important to us, especially during when you do an SAP upgrade or what have you. But so I really think that one of the downsides of maybe a pain point to me is if you don't really understand the business, you're going to be on an island. You're going to be like, well, okay, you're not going to ask for requirements. You're going to be given requirements because you need to know the business, and you got to know what you're selling. You're not in the business of selling IT.
And if you're only siloed in your little IT world, then you're not going to be able to understand what the repercussions are or what the whole point of what they're trying to ask. So being a good technology translator is really helpful, understanding what the business is trying to do and then translating it into how you can add value back to the business through technology, through streamlining, through anything that really improves it.
For sure. I mean, Six Sigma, I have Six Sigma certified. I didn't like it.
Oh.
But unfortunately, it is a certification where you have a different lens. I think this all goes back to my early days. I didn't realize I was a learner, but a lifetime learner of what? Of, again, not only of business, of behaviors of customers. Because as we see customers come and go and generations are different and the needs of different customers, like for instance, like how long can Coca-Cola sell their products to the current generation? It's going to be difficult because they're all starting to see, well, how do I sell into a market where folks aren't really, they're really sensitive to sugar, right? So you really have to understand as an IT professional, it's just not in your silo. It is cross-cutting. It's one of the most difficult jobs because we have to interpret what an accountant says, what a finance person says, what the operation person says, what supply chain manager says, and ultimately the sales guy, which we...
The visionary as well. You can toss that one in there too.
The sales guy is like, they tell you got to do all of it, but it's definitely a difficult role.
And it's really truly being able to envision what they're all trying to get out of the organization so that you can give them advice and then guide them in the right direction in order to implement the right IT, in order to streamline the right things, or else you're just going in the wrong direction.
You're absolutely right, Maggie. One of the things, I've always had to deal with, is somebody has to hold, there's a bank, right? There's a budget. And we have, you have this whimsical thought that, hey, I'm going to deploy this and everybody's going to be happy. But typically, first of all, you need to get the budget for that. You need to show NPV. You got to show what's the return on that investment. At Praxair, we were focused on IRR. So if I'm going to invest in this project, I need to see at least an IRR of over 12 because I can get more in my own, buy stocks back, put money in the bank.
Yep.
So I was always against, how do I do a better job doing than my own company? So my job was to say, I'm going to justify this project, reducing costs, reducing labor, increasing customer satisfaction. That's always in my head whenever I build something because of the fact of just that world of, listen, I have all these folks, I'm driving value. How do I show value for myself? And how do I show value for your customers?
Absolutely. And even just looking at that is, where are you going to invest your time? Where are you going to invest your money? Where are you going to invest your energy? And that's really, you have to look at what makes sense, especially as you're building your businesses, for what is kind of the big bang for your buck. And then eventually you might be able to get to more of your wish list items as things continue to grow. And I know that you actually have started a few businesses. And so I would like to kind of segue into that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And maybe you have some pain points you'd like to discuss, even surrounding hiring or finding space or just collaborating with different individuals.
I think in this day and age of hiring, the expectation is I'm older, and my expectations and my lens is like, well, if I was your age, I would do it this way. And really have to you really have to understand the expectations of everyone's expectations, and you got to say, well, am I going to expect you to work at my work ethic and at my speed? Probably not, right? And that's something that my biggest problem was, maybe, I guess what you call it, road bump is, okay, I'm at this level and someone else's work ethic or maybe the way they're looking at solving problems and dedication isn't at that, because they basically have work-life balance that I've never really thought of until I was hired here at the BNMC. And I think a lot of managers are struggling with that, especially anyone over in my age. I'm not that old, but I'm still old. But over 50 would say, wow, how do I manage this? Because I would do it that way. So I guess that's where I was wrong. My perspective has to be, why is this job your North Star, this effort, this task, and how can we work together to make this important to you? At the same time, giving you some space and ability to have fun and maybe go see a Bills game, or tonight, Thursday night, you're going to say, oh, I got to leave early. Well, that's something you have to do, right? So in my day, we were sitting in suits. You weren't leaving early.
No.
You were working at that desk, and at 5:15, 15, you leave. Or
And it was after the boss left.
Correct.
It was all that time, and you're just like, okay, looking around.
So that's like emotional intelligence, or just understanding the emotions. The bosses had this nonverbals that were very strong. And today I think they're a little less nonverbals. They would just tell you, like, that's cool. But back then, they either give you a nonverbal and give you that look, or they tell you, do it again, you're fired. So that culture doesn't exist anymore. And I think it was pretty toxic, but it was effective. Unfortunately, that's what it was back then. And today, we have to be more aware of our surroundings, our people, our teams, to make sure that it's a win-win.
Absolutely.
For both sides.
And I think it's important too for not only the employer to do the self-assessment of what the organization can provide for the employee, but vice versa. What makes them actually successful? What makes them motivated to do the job? If you're asking them to do jobs where they're like, yeah, I can do it, but it's all in their bucket that they don't like to do, then it's a mismatch. And it's really helpful if they can be upfront and honest about what they really like doing versus what they can do and don't do well.
I like to add to that, Maggie. It reminds me of a time when the philosophy was, if you don't like, you need the stretch goal, something you don't like to do, you need to stretch into that. And in most cases, you can stretch in it, but you're going to just you'll fall. Like, remember Stretch Armstrong? You're just going to snap your arm off.
Yeah.
And the biggest reason is because it goes against your being, your soul. You're like, I can't do it.
It just grinds you the wrong way. It's the friction that you don't need. Someone else will actually thrive in that job. And it's very different based on personality types. And I always say it has to come from a self-assessment. Anyone could be like, oh, you're this personality type. But until that person understands and can also articulate what will make them thrive, that makes that employer-employee relationship very successful.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Now, can I chat about health a little bit with you?
Yeah, sure.
So we were talking about work-life balance a little bit. And overall, we talked about kind of the old school employers where you wouldn't really leave your desk, kind of change to it a little bit, to nowadays where you can really incorporate health into your lifestyle and really kind of look at your longevity of not only your career, but your healthy lifestyle. So would you mind telling us a little bit of the pain points surrounding that and a little bit around your ideas surrounding that?
I mean, pain points from, like, here at the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, we have, I would just say in my past career versus here, because this is going to be like whimsical story.
Yes.
Whimsical story. Wonderful. So let's talk about, like, at Prax here, we had a different kind of philosophy. At the same time, I had to do your work, you do your thing, you're at your desk. And one of the things we tried to do is make sure we're either walking, it was a large campus, we were doing some kind of activity, but sometimes you just go back into the grind because you have a project and you're focused and you end up just being stuck. And we used to call it code muling. You're a code muler. You're just walking that work and that's all you do. So you typically get that kind of mentality of, this is all I have. I mean, I'm going to making bricks out of just mud and straw, and I'm doing this forever, and that's what it felt like.
Doing it, yep.
So that grind ended up kind of fatiguing you to a point where you go home and you sit on the couch.
Oh yeah, because you're already in that low energy kind of mindset.
Because there's no energy. What ends up happening is you're making your bricks, every day in the mud. And you're like, man, I'm going home, and you're like excited to go home. Then you have this whole life balance where, like, you don't want to talk. You basically are processing what happened that day, and you just want to crash, right? And that whole mentality I was in that for a little while, right? So you basically go home and you're exhausted. You have all these responsibilities, people, places, things.
Such decision fatigue too at the end of the day. I don't even want to decide what's for dinner.
Correct. And then what ends up happening is a lot of folks end up having a lot of disputes at home. There's a silence. It's just easier not to talk because you're in a mode that is difficult you're just not in that right space. And I think that phenomenon has been going on for years, right? And you hear about it all the time. And you hear about folks having issues, say their home life with their kids. But it's basically, if you think about it, where does that all reside? So, bullwhip effect is it starts off as a small little iteration and it gets bigger and bigger. Before you know it, you might have your own health issues after a while, right? That's going to develop into something that you're not going to control. Because one day 2 days before it's a year.
Then it's just a habit.
It's a habit after 55 days. So I was there, to be honest. Did I realize it? No. Did I have issues at home? Yes.
You were just too in it in the moment
I
to
was.
even look out.
It's exhausting. I mean, it's like when you work, and they call them the A players. You know, I was that A player. Some people disagree with me.
Work.
Yeah, and you deliver, right? Because at the end of the rainbow, the P&L cycle or so it's so nice working at a company like Praxair because they give bonuses to all the fun things you get. Unfortunately, you pay for that. So there's always a payment, right?
Yeah.
Pay in time, pay in your home life. There's so many different ways. And I was paying in my home life between travel, dealing with all the things that happen to the corporations.
The stressors, the just kind of probably the middle management too. You're dealing with the staff members, you're dealing with the directives from above, all of it.
Paint projects not coming in on time, over, would you say, budgeted projects. So never ending, right?
Yeah,
So you
it's
go,
all your responsibility.
so what's the easiest thing to do? Go home,
Zone
get on
out.
you could have a drink,
Yeah.
sit on the couch, not communicate with your significant other.
Because you might snap at them, you might be irritable, and you held it all in all day. Yeah.
And your children and family, and next thing you just exist. But you're getting your bonus. You're getting
You're on
recognized.
autopilot
Yes.
in the rest of your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was basically the map or the playbook. And most, what happens when you are in that, or you're in that swim lane. You're swimming.
Oh yeah. You
And-
don't even know how far out you're getting.
And it's tough to take the suit off because the suit, I ever hear about why professional swimmers don't take their suit off because they don't have time to pee. It's really difficult. They just pee in the pool.
Okay,
So you
yeah.
end up peeing in your own environment. So you become your environment becomes you.
Interesting. Never heard that before.
Well, because it's just, you're in it. So,
yeah, you're in it, literally.
yeah. So then that's kind of where I was. And then that's any other question.
Oh no, we were talking kind of like the health journey, and
okay.
then how it's definitely a pain point as people progress in their
Yeah.
careers. So then, how do you really overcome it? What advice do you have to kind of get out of that that cloud, if you will?
You want to grow up, you go to college, and you say, hey, my career is, what is it? What's your North Star? What do you want to be? You want to be this executive with fly jet sets? And I remember that person being me, like, oh, I've gone here, and I've been to Brazil, and I've been to Europe. And then next thing I was like, well, you've been away from your house, and you've been to this. And all these things are sacrificing, right? And you're getting, recognized at your company. But how do you get out of it? It's tough because the end of the rainbow is a nice, like, what your North Star is in the pool, right? Your North Star is that you're touching, I'm going to win. And you're competing with everybody
And you're staying within it too, so you're just going.
until you retire. You get your ring or your watch, and then they tell you to leave, and you're like, where's my pool?
Yeah.
And then what happens? Your couch becomes your pool.
Interesting. So then do you think, especially in retirement, when people that are really focused on their career, really career driven, when that is then removed, then only the bad habits exist?
I don't want to say it in general, but I want to say that.
No, but it could.
It could,
Essentially
because
happen, yeah.
it's easy to, you're taking away the North Star. You've taken away my bonus, my ability to drive teams, just me in a room solving problems. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm in here. It's me. We're doing it as a team.
Energizing,
And all of
yeah.
a sudden it goes away. What do you do?
Yeah.
It just vaporizes. The water comes out of the pool. You're at the bottom like this.
Oh, and you're shivering.
That's
and you can't
right.
get out.
That's right.
There's no ladder that goes that low.
There's none.
No.
And that's what I envision of a career. I don't want to be so gloom and doom, but I
So
think
you got off then that train track that was taking you up that hill, up that mountain, and how did you adjust?
at first, to work here at the BNMC, I was a total corporate guy.
Yeah. Was it a culture shock completely?
Folks were trying to tell me, Sam, you're coming in too hot. What's wrong with you? Like, we don't do things like that. We're working for non-for-profit. And it was constant, like, I attributed to my boss, Matt, some Pat, but mostly Matt, was like, slapped me around, like, Matt, Sam, calm down. Take a breath. We're helping the community with your tech, but we need you to calm the F down.
Like, you don't need to be go, 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 go all the time. But you went from the Navy to corporate life to, wait, how do I unwind from this?
Oh, it was
Yeah.
tough. Yeah.
You got all the structure that
Oh
your
my
dad was
God.
looking for.
A lot of structure.
Yeah.
You put me in front of something, I'll get it built. But the problem is you're not. If you had a way to look at yourself while you're building it, you'd be like, oh, I would never do that. I mean, if you watch yourself from above, if there was a little shadow machine or like my little cloud angel called Sam above me, going, what are you doing?
You wouldn't be giving yourself this advice. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my advice is look at yourself from above and say, what are you doing? And how are you doing? Look at around you, because people are like, look at the shadows. Look at like, what are your kids doing? What is your spouse doing? What are you doing in your overall life to say, is it worth? It may be worth it. I don't know. Whatever you have could be assets, could be family, whatever's more important. But I think ultimately you got to everyone has their own. I mean, I know what mine is, but I just think that would be nice to have we can rent an angel to watch over us, which we do have, but they don't talk to us.
And just show us what they're seeing.
Yes.
That's all we want
What
to
would
see
you
is
think?
their view. I think it would be great. Yeah.
I could be yours.
Oh, I'm yours too. I'll let you know.
Just don't come and bother me in different times.
Oh yeah, only when you request me. How about that?
like Kazoo remember Kazoo from Fred Flintstone?
No.
Okay, Kazoo is this little guy showed up. It's a long story.
Flintstones. Yeah.
Anyway.
I just don't remember. Sorry.
I'm old. Anyway, so I think that's really, so here I am. I show up and I meet health and wellness department. And I'm like, I was doing my thing. I didn't really understand food and wellness and health. And I just thought it just worked out. And your mental ability is one of the things we never talk about, right? We work out, but no one thinks about what's in our head. And are you affected? Is your mind ready? Are you ready for the environment you're about to enter? I was not ready. I was corporate Sam. Matt must have been crazy to bring me into this place because I'm ready to just chop trees down and just drive people over because that was me, right?
Yeah, that's what you've been
I'm in
trained
the
to
pool,
do.
get the hell out of my way.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna win.
yeah, it was all about winning for me.
Yeah.
And slowly I found out that through and Matt, again, he's a saint. I don't know why he put up with me, but he just slowly said, you'll get it someday, Sam. You're going to see it. And just around COVID, I started seeing it.
Like it started to click in a little.
A lot.
Yeah? Oh, good.
I really got clicked in. It's not like I'm like getting slower.
Yeah.
I'm think like a maniac.
But you're reprioritizing probably a little bit.
That's true. I think about humanity, the community more. If I think about the lens of if a community member would do, what would they do? How would they feel? Like I never knew that we're giving away during COVID, Mission Ignite, we're giving these PCs away. And I'm like, this is easy. I'll give this away. And then they go to the homes and I didn't realize that it didn't have internet. And they didn't even have something to eat, right? So never thought about these things because you're thinking about it in the community, but that's just it. But it applies to any job you go into. Mine was extreme. It's like I fell off like a huge.
You had to relearn everything. Like, how are things done? What is the pace?
That's right. It was just constant learning, getting Matt to kind of, he's in his own way. He's stern, and he just lets you know this is how we do things here. But some of the things we built, right? So we built a product to help me to get on my lifespan. And so there's a difference between health span and lifespan, and I'll explain in a minute. But we built a product here called Ognomy. And Ognomy, a doctor came to me, his name's Dr. Rifkin, and he said, hey, I want to build this app, a sleep apnea app, because I want to help patients, not just in Buffalo, but because it's so difficult to see a sleep apnea doctor. They're very scarce, they're hard to find. But a lot of folks have sleep apnea, right? So came to me and I said, I don't think you should do this. This is a startup. It's difficult. It's painful. And he says, we're doing it. So he said, we're doing it. I said, well, why do you want to do it? And he said, going back to our tenet, right? How do you help folks in the community? And is your product cross-cutting? Does it help cross-community, cross-community-wide? Genders and races? And he says, yes, because sleep apnea affects everyone, right? So we built that platform, and I was patient zero.
Oh, wow. So you were the whole, let's look into my health and deep dive into it.
So basically what happens, the traditional process of sleep apnea, like the prognosis is you see a doctor, you sleep, you have a sleep study in a
In like a
bed.
sleep test room, right?
That's correct.
Yep.
We had it here.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, right below. I think 8 to 10 beds.
Oh, wow.
And Savero's there now, so there's all kinds of nightmares happening. Anyway, so the new traditional the new technology way would be using a platform. Basically, you have a phone and you telemedicine, you call your doctor calls you through Zoom. You say hello, he says hello, open your mouth, goes through a bunch of questions. And he says, I'm going to send you a sleep apnea test to your home. Mm-hmm. I'm like, great, I can sleep at home, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's something for a pulse oxygen monitor, something around your nose that basically just monitors your breathing. And I didn't think I slept a minute. And I sent it back like, geez, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stand this thing.
Yeah.
Sent it back to him.
nuts.
So through the app, your appointment's a week from now, all very nice and happy-like.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Dr. Rifkin. And there he is, Sam. I got good news, bad news. This is good news and bad news. Oh, man, I was getting all nervous. Man, I said, what's the good news? I said, well, everything seems to work okay.
Oh, the technology's great.
Bad news is I have sleep apnea. I'm like, I have sleep apnea, but what? And I was like completely shocked because I was.
So you never thought you had it leading up until this point. That's fascinating. So it was like a happenstance. It was an accident that you found it out. Wow.
Changed my life.
That's awesome.
So from that day on, I said, well, what do I have to do to get rid of it? Mm-hmm. Well, sleep apnea, you have a CPAP machine, you have these things you put in your throat, whatever, all this. There's all kinds of over-the-counter stuff. You name it, there's something.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, well, basically told me, he prescribed something. I'm not going to talk about it now, but at the end of the day, it's very straightforward. And I said, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. So basically, how to get to 25, BMI below 25% BMI body fat. And I said, I could do that.
Yeah.
Because at that point, when you diagnosed me, I think it was at 28. I was a little heavy back then, but I am thinking I was riding, I was exercising.
Yeah.
But it was one side of the sword, right? You have exercise and health, but you also have food and
The
drinking.
input.
And that
Yes.
drinking side of it, right?
That'll get it too.
That will. So I completely changed in 2000, went on this journey, and now I'm a complete radical. I mean, not radical. I'm really focused on health and wellness, lifespan and health span.
And what's the difference between lifespan and health span?
So your lifespan is your span of life, basically until you are going to just pass, right? And health span is how healthy you're going to be to a certain point without any use of drugs or. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if I want to live till 90, mm-hmm. and if I'm going to get there without any drugs, my health span was about the same, right? Mm-hmm. But if my health span is at 80 and I need some kind of drug or some kind of assistance from nurses or nursing home to get to 90, that basically is a 10 years.
write-off.
It's
Yeah.
10 years, right?
Yeah.
So I'm giving my money to who? To healthcare?
Oh, yes. And then it's just funneling out as well.
Correct.
Yes.
So now I've been working on this for 3.5 years. And
It's turned into a true passion project, I'm sure, as
Yes,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
So you can ask me what it is, but ultimately I have a routine, an exercise routine. They allow me to do things here. I run biking, I bike a lot of places, but we're aligned. The mission here is, again, community, health and wellness, driving innovation. But because I'm so passionate around these tenets, we focus on exercise. We focus on what you eat, when you eat. I'm alive. I feel like, okay, I can get to 90, and I'm gonna strive to get there. And how to get there, and I need to get there at 90. My health span and lifespan should be very, very close.
Right there, yep.
And without me spending dollars at a nursing home. So you see so many stories of folks, they retire at 65 in the pool, mm-hmm. and they're in a wheelchair. They can't leave they have whatever ailment, and they only look outside their home, and they can't go many places because they don't have the energy mm-hmm. to walk outside. And it's a terrible travesty. But my point is, this job saved my life.
Did you? So you never thought that ending up on the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus because you were like, oh, it's just a job. But then you truly started getting ingrained with all the tenants, with everything, and with all of the true passion that I'm hearing coming from leadership on how they truly wanted the place to run, and it affected you in a very positive way. So I love that kind of genesis of just where the super corporate lifestyle, the Navy lifestyle, to them moving into being like, okay, but now let's focus on me. I've done the corporate, I've done it all. Let's focus on community, let's focus on these startup organizations, and go from there.
Correct.
I like that. Awesome. Now, you work with startups all the time. Not only do you have your own, but you also work with startups over at the BNMC. So can you tell us some pain points surrounding generically startup organizations?
You know, the biggest pain point for startups is like every one of them has to deal with funding. They're great ideas, but you know, again, everything's based on scarcity. We can't have an endless supply of dollars. And I wish we could give more funds to a lot of these great startups. They're working really hard, but some of them, potentially their idea, the market is cruel. Yeah. I always say it's cruel. And the reason it's cruel is because potentially you're not ready. Or a market is cruel because there might be a bias towards a startup, whatever. And it's cruel to the startup that wants that money, right? So ultimately I wish it wasn't so cruel, but the fact is it is. Mm-hmm. So in order to manage that, I believe startups really have to be frugal and make their business decisions are very important to their longevity, right? And their own lifespan. So decisions like, well, do I go to this firm to get my patent certified and get my website ready, perfectly ready. The money has to be back to the IRR thing.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision based on what's going to be and you can only invest so many projects in a year. Mm-hmm. You pick the project that's going to add the most value to your organization. Now, we used to have shareholder value. That's what we used to be let this tenant call. We have this, it'll go along. If you want to go far, you go together. Corporations have the shareholder value.
Yes.
Shareholder value. Well, because what else is there, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way.
Their line item is. That's their number that they focus on.
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
if you can't have shareholder value, then what else value? We don't have value. They have to drive you somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. A startup really has it, and it's easy for me to say, but I've been in a few of them, and the problem we have still to this day is, where do you spend your green dollars? Mm-hmm. And I still think it comes down to IRR. Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't never like doing it, but it was a great exercise for me in saying, where do I want to put this? Do I put it in legal services, accounting services, a website? And ultimately, that's, to me, those decisions are very critical as your longevity and if you're sustainable in your organization. Because if you're not having those decisions and you're working with a team and someone has a bias towards tech and someone has a bias for law, you have this kind of, a potential disruption in your startup. So I think startups are really, really important because what happens, that gives a lot of energy and enthusiasm. But I wish if we had another program called a sort of startup where they go out to corporations, they work for a little while, come back and start something, because then they get domain.
Yes.
And the domain is more important to me than the startup, because how do I take this domain that I know about, say Praxair, I want to learn about atmospheric gases and I want to build a startup around it. Because then you can say, well, I have domain. If you have a startup from university, we have a domain. We really don't have domain. We have to find. So my point is, ACV had domain. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's like they had an amazing domain. Like, well, okay, we want to optimize the auctions, and one person had a domain, and they had a great technology person, and they had a great finance person. They built it that way.
Yep.
And I think we need more folks with a lot of time in companies.
And I think that when you are in the larger companies, you notice the cracks a little bit more. The time that you spend there, even the different experiences. Like, I went from public accounting to then local staffing, and it's just like a completely different shakeup. So really understanding what value each organization provides as well goes a long way. And just understanding and coming from having some experience and diverse experience. And I find that the biggest startup successes are the people that are constantly curious, constantly willing to learn, well, would this marketing happen? And they might not be the marketing person, or maybe they have to start as the marketing person, but understanding what their organization does and how they're going to operate and what value they can output or what problem they can solve for those larger organizations from being in it or what have you. You might even have your first client once you solve a problem.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things I can say is, when you work at a corporation, those lifelong relationships you make, and with the networking you have. Like, if you look at my network, I have pretty big network, and a lot of it's Praxair, a lot of it's Avnet, and it's outside of this area, right? Now, there's a lot here, but I mean, the more diverse you are in your network and the ability for you to work outside, you can bring those networking connections, your domain, and next thing you have a company, right? It's like, hey, I need an expert here for a little while, and can I pick your brain? And there's no problems picking those brains. Right now, what ends up happening is, I can tell you, is startup comes, goes across street to UB. There's something called Maven, which is a network of professionals, and they use that system because there's no network. So the networking domain, because you become friends, you're working together in that swimming pool. Right?
Absolutely. Every day.
Right. So what are you gonna do? Like, you're swimming together, like, hey, I'm peeing in the pool.
Yeah, you're being in the pool, I'm being in the pool, cool.
It's like we're eating together. But my point is, I would wish they went to corporations and entities and come back.
Well, it's similar to how law school used to be. You used to kind of go out and then you would go to law school after you kind of figured out what you were really interested in, and then you could kind of specialize as you went. But then it kind of just became kind of that post-college track.
Oh, I see.
So I find that fascinating too, because that's how it kind of used to happen, and people would become that later in their careers. So you're almost saying that having the experience earlier in your career will make you for a more successful entrepreneur later in your career.
I think so.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I mean, there's all kinds of great companies. I'm just like, right now, the market is, there's a lot of opportunities to do things, but I think it's a good time in the market when you have that lull to say, hey, it could be a safe harbor. Go out, come back. I would say, if you have a startup, and first thing that happens, we've seen them for years here. As soon as someone has a child or gets married or a baby, they just like, startup's over. Because one of the spouses says, listen, we need insurance, or we need healthcare, right?
Yeah.
So we really have to kind of look at the whole. We've looked at it, corporations for years. Like, okay, what's your lifestyle? What's your lifestyle? Your balance at home. Same with startups. They're working all the time. I mean, you've seen it, like they're cranking code or working on a marketing presentation for hours, for days, for weeks. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But it is sustainable when you're small or younger.
When you've got all the extra energy.
But what that ends up happening is that pool becomes longer. So like, it's just a longer pool. Before you know, like, you're just like, just get me in and get me out of this thing. And someone throws you that life preserver, and like, you catch it, like, I'm out.
Yes.
And you see a lot of that. They just like, I'm out of this. Like, oh, I'm not working for free.
Absolutely.
So, and we really have to really think about, it's important, you pick your profession, learn, but at the same time, that little angel behind you, what are you doing?
Yeah. And just making sure that, like, you are still balancing things, that you're really truly taking your own priorities into consideration throughout your career, which I think is important. And I do think the younger generations are learning a different way.
Yeah.
And I think that it's beneficial, and I think it's nice to learn from them as well, instead of just like Big Four public accounting that I did.
That's what ends up happening. You get thrown into that. Here's that brick wall.
Yep.
And you'll get through it eventually. Well, you do. It just, you're scarred, right? You go through it. And this current generation will say, I think that's going to be probably Gen Zs, I will say, and millennials are going to say, I'm not going to go through it. It ain't worth it.
Yep.
But
Like, there's got to be another way. We can go around it, above it, whatever we want to do, but you don't have to necessarily
we
go
can
through it.
hire a helicopter.
It's just different. And I think, though, that back to your point, though, you don't know what you don't know. So going into different organizations and having different experience, maybe working with different departments, all of that, you're going to always be adding in different tools to your skill belt. And in addition to that, with the networking that you're mentioning, and then also volunteerism, I think that that's huge too, giving back, because that's putting yourself in a completely different community, different network, everything like that, and then you can actually spend time giving back to the community. So do you do that a lot while you're here? I mean, I know that that's more or less the culture, and I know you through Infotech, Western New York, but what other volunteerism do you think that, would actually help out different organizations, or different individuals? Or would you guide people in any way to kind of expand their network more in their earlier entrepreneurial years?
Because time is scarce again, for young entrepreneurs where they're in startups. I always think that if they had time, if they did, it's really easy to help a non-for-profit say whatever, in our neighborhoods, because you could, like Michelle Knight, right? They're going to need some kind of, transaction website or whatever, but they can practice and try some things they haven't done before. It's like, hey, I'll do it for free. I've never done it before. And they'll do it. They'll take it.
Yeah.
Because, any non-for-profit will take that. Not that they're just not, well, they're basically, but they are desperate, right?
Yeah. And they're open to any kind of ideas, and especially if someone has the idea that is also going to be the doer, then they're like, sure, why not?
It happens all the time. We'll be part of, I'm part of another West New York Heroes, where they're vets with we've given money to them as well. We've helped them out. They have all kinds of folks with PTSD dogs, but, can I help them? No, I'm fairly busy. I do my ride for them. But there are so many startups that could start networking with, you never know where you're going to end up, right? 5 degrees of separation from somebody in Buffalo, right? So you show up in this non-for-profit, and they might know somebody on the board, and before you know it, some other board, maybe it's a board you want to talk to, and then that just starts, propagating. I just got a text the other day, and it's like, look at my friend looking for a job. He was here and here and here, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. I know pretty much a lot of folks. I'm like, were they networking? No.
Yes.
Well, so I told them, and in my text, I said, folks, you should always network when it's the good times.
Yep.
When it's good, you go out there, add value, be seen in the community, just start hugging, do whatever you can do. Because, it's part of what you should be doing, and also as you get back. But when the times are reversed, 180 degrees, and you go into this bad time, and you say, you can't come to folks and say, help me get a job, because you didn't put the time.
You have nothing to pull from.
So that's the same thing. My kind of lesson to startups is you got to put the time in, even though I know you're working on your own startup, but everyone should take that advice, giving back to community, because, we've all got here somehow, through the great grace of God or whatever you believe in. You got here, you've been chosen or been blessed, but you have to get back to what got you here, and that does help. And I think, is lucky is the world of luck. It's good luck or bad luck. Potentially the harder you work, the luckier you get. So I keep thinking, just keep giving back, and somehow it comes back to you.
I agree. It's like that positive karma. Throw it out there, have it come on back. But so that's really great advice for entrepreneurs. Do you have any other advice that you would kind of like to give out, to shell out to those future hopefuls? I think
the most important thing is you really have to understand the folks you're doing business with and who you're going to create a relationship with. Just like anybody, you get married, that's a longer relationship, but a startup it's a 3 to 5 to 10 year relationship. I really think somehow you really have to understand their kind of what derails your team. Like if you're going to know if someone's going to be, off derailed by something very, trivial, then you might not want that person in your team.
Yes.
You really have to understand. So if you don't understand their derailers and don't understand like what their North Star is, then it might not be a good strategy, because, you think about it, then you're really wasting your time, because you're going to deal with infighting.
They're pulling in this direction, you're pulling in this direction. If they're pulling the organization away from the direction of your North Star and your guidance of your startup, then it's just going to cause more friction. Again. I think that's great advice. And really that goes back to just making sure you have the right person in the right seat too. If you might have the right person, but you just need to have that conversation to retool what value they can add back to the startup. Or if it's in a full-time capacity, it might not be. It might be more of a fractional capacity. So I think that there's a lot of conversations that people need to have in order to make sure that it's clearly communicated so that they can have the best working relationship.
I totally agree with you, because it's just, you're committing dollars, time, your soul, everything's being committed.
And you're probably spending just as much time, if not more time, with these people than even with your family. So you want to make sure your time and your energy and your money is being spent where you want it to be.
Correct.
I like that. Awesome. So now where can people find you? How do people get in contact with Sam Marrazzo for the BNMC?
LinkedIn is my favorite place. I do a lot of things on LinkedIn because I just think, it's a great kind of lighthouse. It's going to start sending my content, my brand is on LinkedIn, what I do. I'm not even in a suit anymore. I'm in my new persona is in my rucksack. and middle of Chestnut Ridge, right? Because, I mean, I'm thinking I'm not that, like, suit and tie guy anymore. It's not me.
Yep.
So I'm really, my persona is on not Facebook, I guess is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I really want folks to feel like you can reach out to me. It's a safe place. You know, there are bad ideas, but I'll be open to some of them. And, you know, I'm there in the community, Infotech. I know I've been busy lately on this other project, but really trying hard to help folks where I can help them and meet them where they are. And if I can't help them, we recommend other locations, other partners, other people. So LinkedIn's the best place. But you can always find me here, but you got to pay for parking.
That's
But we
true.
don't mind because that's what pays our salaries is parking.
There we go.
Thank you
It's
so
a
much.
beautiful parking lot. Thank you so much for having us out here today.
Oh,
Beautiful
thank you.
location. Definitely
Thank you.
check out the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. They do have events all throughout the year.
We do.
And a lot of fun in the summer as well.
It is.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Pain Points podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to follow us so you never miss out on future episodes.